Brandon, I want to give you the opportunity because I know there were a lot of talking points that came out of this Daytona weekend. Of course, you had Leigh Diffey coming into the NASCAR and NBC booth as well. That I think was a very popular move among a lot of the fan base. What were your thoughts on what we saw Saturday night for the Coke Zero Sugar 400? And what are your thoughts on Harrison Burton making it into the playoffs now, despite being the lowest ranked full-time driver in points? Is this another example of exposing the system? What do you think?
Yeah, I just want to start with completely agreeing with you about um, the double yellow line rule. Thank goodness we could have been having a much different conversation all throughout today. So I'm glad that that didn't come to bite Harrison. And also, I think back to also 2019 Justin Haley at this summer race. I believe that's where that also uh,
18 Xfinity, he won the 19 Cup
18.
race, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's another great example.
yeah,
He should have won that race, and he certainly got his revenge the next summer in that Spire car in the Cup race. But uh, yeah, which again, top 30 rule would have come into effect. I know Haley wasn't running for points, but Spire certainly was on the owner side of things, and they didn't get into the playoffs because of that win. Now that rule no longer exists anymore. But that's another great example of it.
yeah. And this is probably my second year in a row bringing up that stat, and you had to correct me the same way last year that it was 2018. My brain keeps thinking 2019. I'll get it eventually.
I don't even remember that. We can go back and check the tape afterwards, but you're all
It's
good.
all good. Yeah, Harrison Burton getting the 100th win for the Wood brothers. It's been since 2017 Pocono with Ryan Blaney, and it took multiple drivers to do it too. You think about the Matt DiBenedetto era, and then we're still in the
Paul Menard.
Paul Menard era
Yeah.
too. Yeah, I mean, went through all of that, and that they and the Wood family having to go through that, aligned with Team Penske, and this also disproved something that I thought what was going on for a while, not being able to get a win at drafting tracks because they are that Penske aligned car, the single car. I mean, essentially with their team, a single car team, really hard to get drafting help unless you get some unlikely heroes. And those unlikely heroes for Harrison Burton was the 62 Beer Motorsports of Parker
Yeah.
Retzlaff. I mean, look at him go. Bow ties not really put together there in the end, not really, and some controversy behind that too, maybe going against team orders. But whatever it is, Parker Retzlaff, he put on a good performance as well, and was just as close to a win as well on the backstretch. Huge run on the outside. But Harrison Burton, super talented race car driver. I remember back in 2020, he was on the up and up with Xfinity. That was really his last big year. And then coming in here into the Cup Series with the Wood brothers. Of course, that ride is not going to be his next year. It's going to be with Josh Berry. So unsure of where he's going to go, but this certainly does help getting the win. And I'm also glad that we had a green flag finish at Daytona. You know, even though it goes into extra innings, we get our green flag finish, and we don't have to look back at the tape and go through the scoring loop and see where everyone actually finished. I'm glad we don't have any of that mess, and that the double yellow line didn't play a factor as well. Another thing was the exit of Rick Allen, the entrance of Leigh Diffey for the rest of this year. That was a really great improvement. Now, that's nothing against Rick Allen, but I think it was just time for someone else to give that spot at NBC a try. I'm glad they decided to do that. Leigh Diffey is such a seasoned professional, and we talked about it before the show. It came out of Paris with the Olympics, and also all these other disciplines of not only motorsports but other sports that he has to be so invested in and so familiar with it that it's like he's been around it for years. Well, he's able to step into Daytona, a place he knows very well with the Rolex 24, and comes in and just knows all of these drivers like the back of his hand, and called it like he's been there since day one. It was absolutely fantastic, and it was a refresher to me to be able to hear someone articulate particulars. I don't really know how to put my finger on it, but someone really articulating more than just last names and getting the advantage and momentum coming from somewhere. These catchphrases, you know, that we like to say and are easy to say in the moment. I'm sure. I mean, I'm victim of that and play by play I've done before. My fall on phrases, and I go back and I hate it whenever I do stuff like that. I want to be more specific. Well, Leigh Diffey is a professional, and he knows how to get those specifics out. And it made a really entertaining race, whether you like how it was or not.
Yeah, totally agree. And again, like you mentioned, Leigh Diffey, an absolute pro. And like I mentioned on yesterday's wrap-up show, to come from something completely different, not even a month ago at the Paris Olympics doing track and field. And that's not the only thing he's done for NBC Sports on the Olympic side of things. He did rowing at the Rio Games. He's done bobsled and skeleton and luge at the Winter Games before. I think he even called golf for Network 10 when he was in Australia. I mean, he's done NBC's rugby coverage before as well. And of course, virtually every major motorsports series that you can think of, virtually every major motorsport race. I think really the only one still left on his box is probably the Daytona 500, and it might be a little hard for him to check that one off with Fox having the rights to that race once again here in a new TV deal. But he's called a Cup race at Daytona now. He can at least say that. I mean, he can do it all, and I think people sometimes if they're not in the media landscape might not realize. I know I certainly didn't until I took a couple of classes and started doing. I mean, even what we're doing right now. I mean, there's a lot of homework that goes into this. You have to be presentable and know what you're talking about, and then when you couple that with going into the booth and calling the action on the fly, you have to know it like the back of your hand, like you just mentioned, and he certainly does. And I know we were talking before we came on the air here to even have Parker Retzlaff's name. No disrespect to him or to Beard Motorsports, but that's a part-time team that only runs a couple races a year. It was only Retzlaff's second ever start, and he could set up Retzlaff's story just as well as he could set up Harrison Burton's, just as well as he was setting up Kyle Busch's before Burton passed him with help from Retzlaff on the backstretch. I mean, it was just fantastic to hear him back in the booth, and I wish him nothing but the best. I hope he sticks with NBC through this upcoming deal over the next 7 years, and well beyond that, whatever he's doing, whatever he's calling, I will absolutely listen to it. And I want to say again as well, I cannot emphasize enough how happy I am for Harrison Burton and the Wood brothers. And Brandon, to your point as well, this was their first win since Ryan Blaney in 2017 at Pocono, which was their first win since Trevor Bayne at the Daytona 500 in 2011, which was their first win since Elliott Sadler at Bristol in 2001,
wow,
which was their first points win since Morgan Shepherd at Atlanta in 1993. So for all the history, all the race wins, I mean, 100 of them that you can count for the Wood brothers, they have not had a ton of success in the last 3 decades or so. And we'll throw Michael Waltrip's 1996 All-Star race Winston victory in there as well.
As you should.
For good measure. But, you look past a few victories here and there every half decade or decade or so. The Wood brothers just have not in the modern era had as much success as they enjoyed at the start of the modern era, certainly with David Pearson and several others that have won races for them. So I've never really understood that, to be honest, because I don't think, they've had particularly bad drivers behind the wheel, and I don't think the car has been incapable of getting the job done. It's just been circumstances. I know they had to cut down to part-time, around 2008 at the end of the 2000s with the economy and everything. A lot of teams had to close their doors entirely. We're thankful that the Wood brothers didn't have to do that, but and people forget, they came into, the charter era not having a charter because they weren't a full-time team. They had at least a charter for a year or two, if I recall correctly, with when Blaney was still driving for them. And, obviously they have the Penske Alliance now. And again, Paul Menard, to his credit, had, I think, a pole position and a couple of strong runs here or there, but never quite got close to victory lane. DiBenedetto got close a couple of times. But then Harrison Burton, I think probably in hindsight, moved up to Cup a year or two too quickly. I know, Brandon, you mentioned his 2020 Xfinity season really set the world on fire there with multiple race wins. 2021 wasn't quite as strong, but a lot of people thought, maybe he's ready to make the jump. Everybody's going to be a rookie in a sense with a next-gen car. And, the performance just has not been there for that 21 team. And we'll see what Harrison does next year. I think a lot of people are suggesting maybe a return to Xfinity to compete for a championship, or maybe even the Truck Series. Going down the John Hunter Nemechek road, I think, would hardly be the worst thing for his career. But let's let him have this moment, and let the Wood brothers have this moment as well. Let them celebrate. It is an incredible feel-good story. Having said that, like I mentioned on Encore last night, the team is 34th in points. And I don't know. There's just I think it can be both. I mean, I feel like a broken record because I sometimes describe myself as a radical centrist. Not to get too political here, but I do have very strong feelings on very important topics. Don't get me wrong, but I can at least 99% of the time, as strong as I may feel about something, whether it's as important as your morals or whatever the case may be, or whatever, or as unimportant in the grand scheme of things as how NASCAR determines its champions, I can at least understand where the opposition is coming from. There are very few issues where I don't at least see both sides of the argument or multiple sides of the argument and can believe two things at the same time. And right here I do. Harrison Burton's win was absolutely fantastic and a great story, and we love to see that. We'd love to see an underdog win a Cup Series race at Daytona, no doubt. But you can also look at how it affects the championship fight and the playoff grid and everything and say, well, I don't know. I don't feel like that car has been running strong enough to merit taking one of those 16 spots away from somebody else who's significantly higher up in points, who has significantly more top fives or top tens this year, who maybe hasn't won a race yet, but is on the outside looking in just because of circumstances here. I don't know. I feel like, in Daniel Trotta, who I am a fan of, who I like, who I think does a great job for SiriusXM, tweeted, it seems like a self-contradiction here or something along those lines. I don't have the exact tweet pulled up here. I can see if I can pull it up here so I'm not misquoting her. And I thought I could just go to reply here and get.
Keep rolling.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't understand why it has to be one or the other here. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that there's a sizable amount of the fan base out there that is happy for Harrison Burton winning this race on an individual level, but also, looking at how it affects the playoff grid and saying, what are we doing here? This is the lowest ranked car. Yeah, and I have a tweet now as well. But Brandon, if I think you know which one I'm talking about. If you want to take it.
It was 3 hours ago as of this live recording. The head scratcher for today's on track show. Fans loved Harrison Burton and Wood Brothers win, but don't like the playoff system. Upside down smiley face. Seems kind of contradictory. Close quote.
Yeah. Okay. So I said contradictory. I almost basically had the gist of it here. I didn't want to totally misquote her. So I appreciate you finding the tweet for me, Brandon, because for some reason my x.com feed wasn't loading as quickly as I expected it to. But yeah, I mean, I think that's with all due respect, my head scratcher would be why that's a head scratcher, because I don't think that those are two contradicting opinions there. I think you can look at this and that should be what the top storyline is. And this is another reason I think why I'm not a fan of this system, and admittedly sometimes feel like NBC's coverage is a little too playoff heavy. And this time of year, I guess that's inevitable, but
that's why they want this half of the year.
Well, that's certainly a good
exactly
argument.
Why they pay the big bucks for the championship part of the year. I mean, Harrison Burton winning the Coke Zero Sugar 400 is your main headline. The Wood Brothers snapping their winless streak, 100 wins, is your headline. Harrison Burton making the playoffs is not your headline. Is it important? Yeah, I don't think it's the biggest thing, because we all kind of know that's a if you're a betting person, that's one of the very long shot of actually going anywhere.
Yeah, and again, I agree with you that it is not the headline. It shouldn't be the headline, but I also think it's impossible to ignore. And I had I saw some responses, some people not even responses, people saying, look, I hate the system as much as the next guy even, but let's put these complaints aside for tonight and let's just let the Wood Brothers enjoy their win, let Harrison enjoy the win. And I said, well, hold on a second here. But this is a system that constantly gets talked about this time of year. Who's in, who's out, who's above the cut line, who's advancing to the next round, who has the longest odds to do this or that and the other. I mean, we can't just have this win in your in system in a year where we've removed the top 30 rule and ignore the elephant in the room that, oh, wow, he's going to finish at least 16th in points now. And like I said last night, when I look at the standings, and again, it's not even, I think some people sometimes get this aspect of it lost in the whole debate. It's not even solely about how we crown our champion. It's how, like, I think Kyle Busch was like 13th, 14th in points last year, in a year where he won 3 races and was certainly performing better than he has been this year. I would feel like he's probably about a 7th or 8th place in the standings kind of driver in 2023. But, he had a couple of bad rounds in the playoffs, and that was enough to drop him, probably half dozen positions in the standings lower than he should have been. But then you take Harrison Burton here, and he's going to finish. And again, this is no disrespect. He went out and earned a race victory. And that should be the headline. That's a great moment for him. But it shouldn't be enough on its own to lift him 18 spots higher in championship points. I don't feel like that's too controversial of an opinion there.
What was it supposed to do then?
Well, I guess
in this format, Ben, what is it?
I guess that's probably what the counter is. This is the era that we're in now, and winning gets you into the playoffs, and that's all that matters. Unless this win had come at Talladega in the fall after the playoffs had already began, and then it means nothing. And he still finishes 30-something in points. It's the fact that this win happened 2 months earlier, before the playoffs. That's gonna lock him in. But again, I said, and again, I don't love making stick and ball sports comparisons, but people that defend the playoffs bring up the 2007 Patriots and the 2016 Warriors all the time. So I think that's fair game for me to ask if the 2-15, apologies, Kobe, Carolina Panthers defeated the 14-3 Kansas City Chiefs.
It's okay. He knows they're bad.
Yeah, I know. I'm just apologies that's the team that I have to use the example for. But if the Panthers beat the Chiefs in Week 18, they wouldn't be playing Week 18 because they're not division rivals. But whatever, if they beat a 14-3 team the last week of the regular season, they get in the playoffs? Should that alone? I mean, they had this major upset victory in what is still ostensibly the regular season finale in many respects for a lot of these teams to try to get into the playoffs, and they won. So hey, 2-15 Panthers, take the 7 seed, take one of the 14 playoff spots. But Houston Astros with a 31-29 record or whatever it was in 2020. Go! You're going to the ALCS because we're expanding the playoffs. I mean, I don't know. I just think that with our friend Jackson's comment there, it's another good example. It's just I don't think you can ignore that. It is absurd to think about the lowest ranked driver and team in points full time with one driver, again, because I know there's rotation drivers for a couple of those cars, but are they a top 16 team in Cup this year? I don't think very many people are arguing they are. It's not a knock against them. It doesn't mean that they can't go out and on their best day win a race. More power to them. But should that alone guarantee them a playoff berth and a 16th place points result? I just don't think it should.
I mean, this is one of those complicated topics. Like, maybe it shouldn't, but is your concern more about Harrison Burton getting into the round of 16 and being the 16th driver when it's all said and done? Or is it, like, on the scale, is it more in concern for Harrison Burton being a lost cause when he gets to the round of 16, or is it more for those other drivers of what could have been, and they end up winning the next week and it doesn't matter, like Bubba or Ross or Kyle Busch?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both. I think it can be, Harrison probably shouldn't be that high in the final standings, but also, and again, people would probably say it doesn't really matter who the 16 seed is or whatever, because they're not going to win championship anyway. I don't expect, with how they've been running all year, Ross Chastain or Bubba Wallace or Kyle Busch or any of these bubble drivers to go on deep championship runs. But, we talked about Austin Dillon at the start of this segment. His playoff appeal was denied because he won a race, and he probably should have won that Richmond race on speed. Kyle Busch was close to winning this race on speed here at Daytona. I mean, I think RCR might be finding that speed once again here these last couple of weeks. Kyle Busch had a great run in Michigan too. I think they're turning a corner. I think Kyle Busch, being the veteran champion that he is exponentially more likely to, if not even win a championship, at least make a run to the round of 8, at least make things interesting if he squeaks into the playoffs than Harrison Burton is. And by the way, I would be all for Harrison Burton and the Wood brothers going out and proving me wrong and making a run of the round of 8 themselves. I think that would just add on to the incredible underdog story, and more power to them if they can do that. But when you come into the Daytona race only having, I think his best finish this year was, I think he tied it at Michigan, best finish on a non-super speedway drafting track. He was 11th at Atlanta, 10th at Talladega. It was 14th at Michigan. That was his best non-drafting finish this year. I don't expect that car to be able to make a turnaround that quickly, even with how much of a momentum boost this is going to be, to do anything of note in the playoffs. And when that's the case, I'm sorry, I kind of view it as a wasted spot.
I mean, like that's the way it works. It works the same for Harrison Burton as it would for Bubba Wallace or anyone there that won last night. It would be the exact same Saturday night. It'd be the exact same outcome. And I get what you're trying to say.
Sure, but then why? Yeah, and again, I actually agree with what Charlie Krall said on Twitter this week. I don't know for sure. I don't want to speak for Charlie. I assume, knowing Charlie's other opinions on the sport, but Charlie probably is a playoffs defender. I don't want to say that definitively. I haven't stalked his Twitter account that much here, but I don't want to speak out of turn. But I do agree with what he tweeted in that, look, this is a feature of the system. This isn't a bug. They literally took that rule away to make something like this possible. But then I don't know. Like, I think the reason that rule was in place was to prevent Spire Motorsports from messing up the Owners' Championship when Justin Haley won that summer Daytona race. It was to prevent Chris Buescher, who ultimately did squeak into the top 30, but Front Row Motorsports, even in 2016, even though they had won that Talladega race with David Reagan and David Gilliland, that 1-2 finish, like they were on their way up, but they weren't, the occasional contenders even that they are today. Chris Buescher was, a Cup Series rookie. He just won an Xfinity Series championship, but he wasn't going to do anything of note with that team and that equipment at that point in his career in the playoffs. I think there's, and he got the job done. He finished in the top 30, did what he needed to do. But that's why that rule was in place. If you can't even do that, then why do you belong in the top 16? I don't think you do. And I'm not going to apologize for that opinion, because I think you can have that opinion while also being incredibly happy for Harrison Burton and the Wood brothers, because it is a great story.
Yeah, I'm just going back through the comments here on Danielle Trotta's original post that we just read earlier. As we read, Joe, I wonder if the RTA wanted the top 30 rule removed. They advocate for the teams and have disagreed with NASCAR. Removing the rule helped the RTA teams.
Yeah, I mean that's a good theory. I don't know, necessarily if there's any truth to that. There very well might be, but again, that's, and I'm sure that's part of the negotiations going right now with the charter system. Because I think the RTA, the owners coming together, I think they have a lot more power than people might realize, and maybe that's part of it too. If it's winning in, who cares if you're outside the top 30? You should be winning in for everybody who's eligible. And by the way, when you're already going to the top 30 and there's only 34 full-time drivers in the series, like when you're going that low, you might as well just, I think, have a winning year in for everybody. I think I like what Colby Evans has said on Twitter this week as well. I think that if anything, it should probably be a top 25, or maybe even what the old original wild card used to be from 2011 to 2013, which would be top 20. You can be a multi-time winner, 11th through 20th in points, and you'll get one of those final to chase for cup spots. Because I think if you can't even be top 20 in a straight up points battle, the chances of you making much noise in the playoffs, I think, are probably slim to none. So
there's a couple thoughts here from one of the commenters here, Steve. Just because fans like to see the 34th place car win a race doesn't mean fans think the 34th place car should be in the playoffs. If the 0-14 Vikings beat the 11-3 Packers late in the season, they still have no business being in the playoffs.
Exactly.
And then Wood Brothers Racing commented, respectfully here, honestly, I think a scenario where you could arguably be mad over the team/driver winning and the playoff implications is if we had as if we had a hand in the rule being made. We just did what we try to do every week, and it happened.
And that was from Wood
That
Brothers
was from
Racing?
official Wood Brothers Racing an hour ago.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Okay, I see it now. That's a direct direct reply to Danielle's tweet there. Danielle Trotta, I should say. Yeah, I mean, I get it. And again, it's nothing against, I want to make that as abundantly clear as I can. It is nothing against Harrison Burton. It is nothing against the Wood Brothers. I mean, because you have people out there that are like, oh, anybody not named Kevin Harvick winning the championship in 2020 is totally undeserving. That's not me. Ryan Blaney won the championship last year when he would have been 6th or 7th in a straight up battle. I'm not one of those people. Every driver, every team has the same rules to play by, and the ones that maximize their opportunities and got to the championship 4 and then performed on that day, you are a deserving champion. You're not going to hear that from me saying, take their.
We're not keeping our own Winston Cup points around here. We play by what you play by.
Yeah, and I even agree with what Mike Bagley said last year. I think it's fun to look at, it's fun to tally up, it's fun to play a fantasy game and all sorts, but it is kind of a waste of time because if you didn't,
it is.
With Ross Chastain ride the Martinsville Wall in a regular season championship points format.
There's Absolutely. No chance that they'd ever race that way, the way they're racing now, if it was a full point season.
So that move alone, you move him back, whatever it was, 4 or 5 spots, and then you move everybody else up 1 spot. And that's just one example of an infinite number of, the racing and the results would be different. So it can give you an idea. And when Harvick is as dominant as he is in 2020, I think you can maybe say a little more definitively he probably would have been the champion. Corey Heim in trucks last year is the same way. But you can't say for sure. We have the system we have now. You guys are deserving champions, and Harrison Burton is deserving of getting into the playoffs because he did what he had to do with the system that he was given and everybody else was given. And Kyle Busch hasn't done that yet this year. Ross Chastain, Bubba Wallace, they haven't done that yet this year. It's not their fault, but it's a reality.